Hi, it's me. Listen, you know what's not cool? The sun. Ew, stinky. I mean, look at this idiot in the sky. Oh wait, you can't, because it hurts your eyes. What is it hiding? Why can't I look? I mean, what even is it? A yellow dwarf. Ah! You know what's better than being outside under the watchful gaze of exploding space gas? Being inside all the time. Don't you want to be like me? Don't you want to recruit 1 to 3 of your friends to do the same thing? Good! Video games are the perfect way to keep you and your comrades safe indoors. But hey, the one good thing is that the sun means summer, and summer means the Steam Summer Sale. Let's talk about multiplayer roguelikes. You know, this genre has typically been single-player focused, just like the traditional roguelikes they spawned from. Now I'm a big-time fan of roguelikes in all their forms, but I gotta say, when I got around to trying some that are made to be played with friends, that was a total blast. Now I'm on a crusade to expose these games to more people. I'm going to make sure you are informed about them so you can have fun with your friends too. Then people will make more of these games so that I can add them to my ever-growing dragon hoard of a Steam library. Think of this as a showcase of some cool games that you might like, not so much as a hard review. In fact, here's your review. All of these games are recommended. I think they're all worth their original asking price, even if you don't manage to get them on sale, and they're all a good time to play, even if you only go at them solo. Oh, and the list is in no specific order. Alright, let's get on with it already. First up, we have what is probably the most well-known game on this list, sitting with over 180,000 reviews on Steam currently, Risk of Rain 2. Now I wanted to get this one out of the way early because chances are, most people watching this already know about this game. But for those of you who don't, allow me to introduce you. Risk of Rain 2 is a third-person shooter in which you'll be fighting off increasingly dangerous hordes of enemies. Rather than spawning in at set waves, foes will be appearing continuously, and as time passes during the run, and the timer hits certain intervals, they will increase both in strength and number. The basic gameplay looks like this. Drop into a level, defeat enemies for money, spend that money to open up chests that are scattered throughout the area for random items, and find the teleporter when you're ready to move on, either because you've looted everything you can find, or because you're trying to hurry up and keep pace with the timer. Do this for 5 stages in a row and beat the final boss on the 6th stage. Risk of Rain 2 boasts a fairly healthy roster of playable characters, all of which are entirely unique. Each has a primary attack and 3 abilities, offering up different enough playstyles that chances are you'll find at least one that you really click with, though most characters will need to be unlocked first. Whether you prefer melee or ranged combat, rapid onslaughts of bullets or slow, devastating burst damage, sprinting around, levitating through the air, or swinging on a grapple hook, one of the survivors has you covered. The item system is fairly unique to Risk of Rain as well. Rather than a handful of more dramatic changes, the game opts to see you gathering dozens on dozens of smaller items and letting them stack near infinitely. There aren't really many items you wouldn't want, but depending on your character, you'll certainly find that you favor some over others. As an example, the Huntress can use her primary attack while sprinting, something most other survivors cannot. Therefore, an item that, say, increases her sprint speed, or blocks damage while she sprints, becomes that much more valuable. There also exists your classic roguelike Devil Deal equivalent in the form of lunar items, which tend to do something good and also something bad. Oh, and while I am trying to keep these segments short-ish, I would be remiss to not at least mention the soundtrack, which is pretty fantastic. Multiplayer functions almost identically to single player, but with more enemies and items to accommodate the extra players. When playing with friends, you'll likely find yourselves splitting up at the start of a new map, running around to gather items, calling out when you find something that pairs exceptionally well with a specific teammate, and gathering back at the teleporter to fight the stage boss before moving on. The game starts out fairly slow and harmless, but by the end of a run, you'll find yourself against enemies both numerous and deadly, where standing still for a moment or two can get you killed. Luckily, everything gets amped to 11 by the late game, including the players. You'll certainly find yourself feeling quite powerful if you've managed to collect a healthy amount of synergistic items.
How you doing? Pretty good.
My only real gripe with multiplayer is that when you die early in a level, it can be very difficult to catch back up. You won't come back until the next stage, meaning that you missed out on every item that dropped after you ate dirt. The game has no real mechanics to help you bounce back, other than your friends letting you take a bigger share of the items on the next level, meaning you might find yourself even more vulnerable to dying now that the game has become harder, causing the situation to snowball into a death loop. During your runs, you'll find plenty of challenges to unlock items, interesting game modifiers, and alternate abilities. Not to mention, if you like the game, you can pick up the Survivors of the Void DLC for a couple extra characters, items, stages, enemies, and an alternate game mode. There's also another DLC, Seekers of the Storm, coming out in the near future. And if that's not enough, Risk of Rain 2 has a very healthy modding scene on Thunderstore, offering pretty much everything you can think of, from items and characters that feel like they belong in the base game, to those that,
Hey, it's me, Goku!
don't. So yeah, all in all, Risk of Rain 2 is an easy recommendation, and it sits at 25 USD on Steam. Lots of fun and a fantastic example of how much more enjoyable roguelikes can be when you add friends into the mix. Next up is a personal favorite, Gunfire Reborn. This time we're looking at a first-person shooter steeped in Chinese mythology. If I were to try and explain Gunfire in the fastest way possible, I'd probably say roguelite Borderlands, at least in terms of pure gameplay. Why Borderlands? Well, on closer inspection, this game kinda wears its inspirations on its sleeve. You've got weapons dropping from enemies that have randomized modifications. There's an elemental system where certain damage types are extra effective against specific types of health. Even the characters themselves each boast a unique primary ability and a skill tree that is divided into 3 themed categories. And, just like Borderlands, it's a lot of fun with friends. The levels you traverse through consist of shuffled rooms, but are indeed linear. The focus here is not on the exploration though, as the gunplay is what you come for. It's very satisfying, and most every weapon on offer feels great to use. They're split into common types such as snipers, pistols, shotguns, and so on, but each weapon has a unique gimmick or alternate fire that allows it to stand out even amongst those in the same class. Let's take the assault rifle category. One is a standard burst fire weapon, one can tag enemies to let your bullets home in on that spot, and one deals fire damage with the alternate function to shoot out little exploding fireballs. The same praise can be said for the creative visual design as well. Instead of a flamethrower, we have a little red dragon. A pistol isn't necessarily a pistol, it could be a kunai or a magical talisman. In addition to weapons, you'll also find occult scrolls that act as the passive bonuses typically found in these action roguelites. More dash charges, higher elemental damage, cheaper shops, and so on. Most of these will be found inside vaults, fun little side rooms to keep your eyes out for that break up the linearity. They'll contain a challenge of some sort, whether it be a fight against an elite mini-boss or a short parkour obstacle course. And of course, the characters themselves are probably the biggest highlight. Just like Risk of Rain 2, each is completely unique. They all have a cooldown-based primary ability and a more spammable, ammo-based secondary ability. At the end of each stage, you'll be given 3 random choices for an Ascension upgrade from a pool of 18 that is entirely unique to that character. Each of these can be further upgraded to a maximum level of 3 and become pretty powerful by the end, even allowing you to form an entire playstyle around what might seem like an underwhelming ability at first. If you don't believe me, try doing a run with the Crown Prince, the starting character, and focus only on his smoke grenade ascensions. Early on, these serve as just a little bit of utility, but after some upgrades, they can wipe entire rooms alone. I called them skill trees, but ascensions don't have to be taken in any specific order, and the fact that they're split into 3 categories only really serves to, well, categorize them. There isn't any mechanical purpose for it. Now, it isn't this cut and dry, but typically one category will focus on the hero's primary ability, one on their secondary, and one will push them into a niche that they excel at, such as the long-range character, the elemental character, or the tank. A skill tree does exist, however, in the form of a meta progression system, because this is indeed a roguelite. Now, if that's something that turns you off, allow me to assure you that not only can you increase the difficulty to put the challenge back into the game, I'd argue that the highest difficulty is the definitive way to play, as it gives you access to new mechanics that are unique to it, such as game modifiers, new vendors, and enhanced versions of occult scrolls. My only minor complaints with the game are that 1, some of the information isn't super well explained to new players, such as how the lucky shot mechanic works. And 2, the translation can be just a tad off sometimes. You'll be able to understand what the game is saying, but sometimes it'll say it in an overly wordy or roundabout way, if that makes any sense. Multiplayer will be sure to up the challenge to make up for increased player counts as well. As a trade-off, you'll be able to pick each other up from bleeding out, and can swap and share weapons and scrolls to help your teammates achieve the build they're going for. The base game has 6 characters that fill your typical role archetypes, and there are currently 2 DLCs that add 2 more characters each, all of which are just as fun and unique. A 3rd DLC is on the way too, which I'm pretty excited about. There's lots of content to go through, tons of stuff to unlock, and the devs recently added a cosmetic-only season system with no FOMO involved. You can always buy stuff from past seasons, and it only uses in-game currency. Gunfire Reborn goes for 20 bones on Steam. It is probably one of my favorite roguelikes, even when I'm only playing it solo. And now we get into the more obscure titles, starting with Vagante. This game is criminally underrated. I stumbled upon it on Steam one day, and aside from that, I don't think I've ever heard another person talking about it. What we have on offer here is a 2D action platforming dungeon crawler with a charming pixel art presentation. You'll be navigating through levels, fighting off enemies, looting treasure chests, and trying to survive until the next area. The closest comparison I can think of would maybe be Spelunky. However, while Spelunky can often support a quick, reactionary playstyle, Vagante fosters a slower, more methodical approach, a classic dungeon crawl. There won't be any ghost that spawns if you take too long on a level, so you're free to take your time and observe your surroundings, and I very much encourage you to do so. Just like Spelunky, Vagante has a penchant for slamming you back down to earth in mere moments when you think you're doing pretty darn good. Whether it be from a boulder trap, a spike pit, or a boss that you just can't seem to get the timing down on. Make no mistake, this game can be brutal, and you have to be the type of player that enjoys the struggle. And like every game on this list, it's even more fun to suffer with friends, if your group doesn't mind a challenge. The main thing that sets this game apart from something like Spelunky is how much it keeps in line with elements from traditional roguelikes. While it's not turn-based or taking place on a grid, it does have some familiar ingredients. Unidentified items, cursed equipment, potions and scrolls, and so on. There's a bigger emphasis on RPG elements here over platforming. You'll be leveling up and assigning skill points toward attribute scores or one of a few skill lines unique to your class, of which there are 5. Your classic Knight, Rogue, and Mage, as well as the Wildling and Houndmaster. In addition to class, you'll also be choosing a background, each of which gives you a small bonus to nudge you toward your preferred playstyle, and make each run a tad more unique from the start. Many of these are fairly basic, offering some stat trade-offs or bonus items. Others are more dramatic, like Acolyte of Chaos, which causes entirely random events to happen for better or worse. Bring this one into multiplayer at your own risk. One combination I like to run is picking the Mage class and putting early points into Alchemy to automatically identify and reroll potions. I'll then pair this with the Snake Eater background, which lowers the effectiveness of healing potions, but allows poison potions to heal you as well. With those combined, I try to maximize the amount of healing for both myself and my partners, spreading around the healing potions and keeping all that delicious poison to myself. Combat is straightforward and simple, very hack and slash. You can quickly swap between equipped items by hitting a button, and you have a slot dedicated to a melee weapon, ranged weapon, and spell. Melee attacks are reliable, but require adjusting to the timing as they have a bit of a wind-up. Ranged attacks can keep you safe, but also stationary, and you'll need to practice to consistently get the aim right. And magic can be quite powerful, but requires a charge-up time and has a limited number of uses that come back at the campfire between levels, a la Dark Souls. And of course, each class will typically have a way to specialize in these types of combat, if you choose to focus on those skills. Rogues can move while drawing a bow, mages can cast faster, knights can block attacks, and so on. Other than that, you can expect to find all manner of goodies in your explorations. Consumable items, different types of weapons and spellbooks, and helpful gear to buff your stats that can often come with fun enchantments like a fiery jump or the ability to phase through walls or floors. There's a lot to discover and experiment with in Vagante. Different shrines to gods can be found, and items can be offered for different benefits, or they can be destroyed, which causes a number of effects. You can bring an animal or an unwanted spellbook to a campfire to cook it for healing, something that is immensely valuable in this game. There are even fake walls and some branching side paths to go down. To reiterate, this game is severely underrated. I think it would earn the title of Hidden Gem. If you, or even better, you and your friends, enjoy a bit of a struggle, Vagante is a wonderful little game, and I wish more people knew about it. It'll cost you 15 smackers, so go check it out.
She's just laughing at him. It's kind of rude.
Barony hits a lot of the same notes that Vagante does while having a different overall feel. It's another real-time dungeon crawler that plays into a lot of the tropes of classic roguelikes, but this time in first person. Just like Vagante, Barony is more grounded than some other roguelikes out there. You're not going to achieve unkillable god runs or find an overpowered synergy. What you will be doing is traipsing through dimly lit corridors, carefully keeping your eyes out for traps, taking care not to grab the attention of multiple enemies at once, and scavenging whatever you can find to help you make it to the next floor. The dungeons can be quite deadly, and it's not uncommon to find yourself running away from a single skeleton on floor 1, choosing instead to regroup when you're certain that you have an advantage and can protect every point of HP that you can. Just like the roguelikes of old, Barony puts a large emphasis on survival and resource management. Keeping your health up is the obvious one, but you'll also need to maintain your equipment as it slowly degrades with use. You need to find food to fulfill your ever-growing hunger. And though these two things will naturally cause you to want to hoard everything you find, you also have limited inventory space, and every item you hold contributes to weighing you down, decreasing your movement speed and making escape from an unwinnable encounter all the less likely. This game is mostly gear-based. Your stats will increase, but there are no skill points to assign. What this means is that any playable class can do anything, though effectiveness may vary. If you choose to start as a wizard and decide that you'd like to use an axe this run, you simply need to find one. There are a good selection of these classes to pick from, and each essentially gives you an appropriate starting kit to kickstart your playstyle, and some attribute biases, meaning certain attributes like strength or intelligence have a higher or lower chance of increasing on level up. Other than that, your skills are increased passively by just doing them. Your sword skill increases over time by simply using swords. 2 DLC packs are also available, Myths and Outcasts, and Legends and Pariahs, each of which add 4 new playable races, which all come paired with a matching class that can be picked by the human race as well. These add some specialized options if you want a more heavily modified playthrough. The Succubus swaps the functionality of cursed and blessed items, making you want curses. The Shaman class has a heavy focus on shapeshifting into a few other forms. The Skeleton doesn't eat or breathe, but has incredibly slow natural health and mana regeneration. They're definitely fun if you feel like adding that extra bit of spice to your run. Overall, Barony very much lets you tackle situations in your own way, opening access to that sweet, emergent gameplay. Can't open a locked door? Perhaps you have a Staff of Unlocking. Maybe a pickaxe to tunnel around it. A levitation potion to cross a pit and come around from the other side. Or you could simply bash it down. In addition to scavenging for equipment and resources, you can also find spellbooks to learn magic, get an alembic to mix or duplicate potions, a tinker kit to turn scrap into useful contraptions, or find NPC adventurers and recruit them based on your leadership skill. There are secrets and shortcuts to discover, increasingly larger dungeon floors to explore, and overall, your runs will tend to run a bit longer than some other games in the genre, provided you stay alive. Recently, Barony has had an entire overhaul of its UI, not only making it look much nicer, but adding tons of tooltips and readily available information. Plus, there's a great tutorial that goes into all the different mechanics. Now is a great time to be a new player. I bought and enjoyed this game long before any of my friends had it, until they picked it up on a whim one day during a sale. Ever since, multiplayer has been my favorite way to play Barony. Trying to build a cohesive party to support each other's strengths and weaknesses, making sure everyone shares around equipment to have the group properly geared out, all to have it come crashing down because a wandering troll snuck up behind someone. It's good, chaotic fun, just don't let the overconfidence of numbers get the better of you. If your curiosity is piqued, Barony will cost you 20 good boy points off of Steam. Have fun! Rabbit and Steel is the newest game on this list, and I knew I had to include it if for no other reason than for how unique it is. What I want to say is that this is a bullet hell roguelike, but that isn't the entire truth. More specifically, it's a 2D game about defeating bosses while doing MMO-style raiding mechanics. More specifically again, it's about doing MMO-style raiding mechanics heavily inspired by, and occasionally parodying, Final Fantasy XIV. Gee, I wonder which playable race the dev likes most. For some people out there, this is enough to be immediately intrigued. For others, less familiar, let me explain. Essentially, while this is still bullet hell adjacent, there are bullets to be avoided and the player has a tiny little hitbox. The game is more about identifying the boss's telegraphed attacks and responding appropriately, which puts you in a position to avoid the damage entirely. Sometimes you'll have a symbol over your head and you have to stand in the matching circle or you'll take damage. You might be tethered to another player and the two of you have to stretch out this tether or you'll take damage. The boss might activate a shockwave in an attempt to push you back into a hazard, so you need to adjust your positioning in time, or, you guessed it, you'll take damage. There are plenty more examples. This gets exceptionally tricky as these mechanics start to layer on top of each other at the same time or queue up one after another. If this looks difficult to learn, well, it kind of is, at least if you're not used to this kind of gameplay. Each enemy will start the fight off rather slowly, effectively teaching you the way the mechanics work. Even so, the learning process will often see you getting slapped in the face while your brain scrambles to process what it's seeing. Starting out on a low difficulty would probably be advisable until you get the hang of things. But rest assured, you will eventually get the hang of it. Bosses have specific movesets, and with enough repetition, you will start to learn the mechanics. You'll struggle and take some stray hits. Maybe you'll be in the right spot on accident. Maybe you'll see a friend do it properly, and you'll hit that moment of, oh, I get what it wants me to do. And after that, the next challenge comes in the execution. Once you've got it down, it's very satisfying. So, where does the roguelike come in? Well, the game structure looks like this. First, you pick your class, starting with 5 unique choices and a few more to unlock. Each of these classes has 4 abilities in the form of a primary attack, a secondary, a special, and a defensive. All of these differ from class to class, but everyone's defensive comes with a very brief invincibility, something you can take advantage of when you screw up a mechanic. Now, I'm not going to go into detail, but everyone has an implied rotation that you'll need to take advantage of if you want to squeeze maximum efficiency out of your damage. This is more important on higher difficulties, where you'll have a timer to beat bosses before you automatically lose. This also plays into a bit of a friendly competition since your DPS is shown at the end of each fight, which I think is a fun idea. It serves as a general metric of how effectively you played, since it's otherwise quite difficult to see how much damage any one individual is doing during a fight. Anyway, after choosing your team, the game functions more or less as a boss rush, fighting them one after another. You'll have 2 things that break this up. The first are these treasure capsules, where you'll get passive items that do all sorts of effects, typical to action roguelikes. The interesting thing is that the game treats it like loot in an MMO, namely that everyone is seeing and choosing from the exact same items. This is a small but welcome addition, not only because it plays into the themes of the game, but because it causes a discussion amongst the group about who should get what and which items are most effective on who. You can also roll off for an item, and the loser gets money to spend in the shop. Speaking of which, the shop is the second thing you'll run into that isn't a fight. The most basic way to earn cash is to simply have a high impact during battle. The shop is a very significant place because you can pet the cat, but also you can buy stuff. It's your main source of healing, and you can get some potions that buff you for the entire level. The biggest thing on offer though are upgrades to your abilities. Each ability can only have 1 upgrade, but the upgrades come in 5 different flavors for all 4 abilities, leading to all manner of possible combinations. Some of these upgrades change how they function pretty majorly too, adding or removing some functionalities, making it more damage or more utility focused. It's yet another fun way to add variety to each run. Rabbit and Steel is probably the game on this list that is most heavily impacted by the presence of other players. All the roguelikes I've talked about today are a good time even if you're only playing solo, and this is no exception. But there's definitely a little something missing, and I feel like this game is best experienced in multiplayer to get the most out of it. But hey, that's the whole point of this list, right? Regardless, the combination of roguelike and MMO raiding is a surprisingly fun mix that I'd never considered before, and if that sounds like a good time to you, I'd certainly recommend checking this one out. Oh, and you can pick up Rabbit and Steel on Steam for $15. Boodle. And there we have it. A handful of multiplayer roguelike games that will hopefully give you and your friends many hours of fun. Okay, bye.